all face seasons in life where there is grief, where perhaps unexpectedly or perhaps after a long illness that somebody that we love dearly will pass away. And well, particularly as people of faith, I suppose different ways of dealing with that, different cultural traditions as well. But however we deal with it, it's always tough. It is never easy. Joining me on the program now from the theology team at Laidlaw College, Dr. Maja Whitaker. Kia ora, thank you so much for your time today.
Kia ora, Andrew. Good to be with you.
Now, I know that this is your lived experience and quite fresh, really. You've had a loss in the family, and whilst, you know, this is a topic which you lecture on and you help other people in this process, it is different when it's you, when it's personal. It's still a shock, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So my mother passed away just 2 months ago. She had been unwell for a while. She had a brain tumor, and we were expecting, though, that the prognosis was going to be quite different. And then it turned out it was going to be terminal. And she would have been Waitangi Day. I took her into urgent care, and she went into hospital and then into a rest home, and then slowly passed away. So she went through that process where the body, so she eventually lost movement, she lost speech, then off fluids and hydration, and then the body really shutting down. And so we sat with this process through her, and it was really, really difficult and costly, but there was also a sense of it being like actually quite a privilege to sit with her in it. But like you say, like I thought to myself, well, I come to this kind of fairly well prepared. Like I've got quite a well-developed theology of suffering, done some things thinking about end-of-life care and being present and weakness and all of that stuff. But yeah, when it comes to living it out yourself, especially with someone, you know, who's really dear to you, it presents a whole range of new challenges to you.
No, it certainly does. I mean, it is different if there is a goodbye opportunity, I suppose, and no less tragic, but it's a different type of grief, a different type of grace, perhaps, when you're able to say goodbye, to prepare yourself to grieve. Do you think?
I think so. I think there really is a gift in that, and I was, very grateful for that. But there's also actually some other different challenges, because you're living with this constant anticipation of grief, and that is actually really weighty. Like I think it's sometimes you pre-grieve a little bit, and that maybe saves you a little bit on the other side. It doesn't hit you, but you spend a lot of time anticipating it and grieving a lot of small losses along the way. Like I remember thinking to myself, oh, this is the last time when my mum is going to ask me about how I'm doing.
Yeah.
This is the last time when she is going to be able to embrace me, or this is the last time, or even before that, thinking, oh, this is the last time I'm going to eat a meal that my mother has prepared. Like I didn't have that, been going, oh, that's never going to happen again. I think you do grieve all those little losses, and I'm just so grateful of being able to do that in the context of faith. Like it's just like such a big difference. And I think that was something I observed, compared to myself. I'm a Christian, have been my whole life, and my brother who's not. Just for me, the hope that it is, knowing that my mum, because she was very ready to go and be with Jesus, I think, for a long time there. She woke up every morning and was like, oh, come on, God. I really did not want to wake up this morning. I expect she was actually having some quite strong words with the Lord.
That is a complicating factor, and then also with the faith. I mean, if somebody has an illness, for example, we also have hope that God could bring healing and different expectations in that space. If we're also being real with God, we I suppose have the opportunity to express our own anger and frustration and disappointment and heartbreak.
Absolutely.
That God hasn't done something different.
Yeah. And I think what's important to understand is that while often in our churches and in our culture, especially in Western culture, we don't leave a lot of space for expressing these difficult emotions, or let alone expressing them to God. Like the Bible actually gives us a lot of language for that. Some of the Psalms we love because they're joyful and they're praising God, but there's a lot of, God, I'm really angry. God, I'm disappointed. God, I feel like darkness is my only friend.
Wow.
There's a lot of language in the scriptures, Lamentations, and throughout the prophetic works, they're given to us to help us to say even these things to God. And I think, one of my big messages I would want to say to people in spaces of really difficult emotions is that God is big enough to absorb that. He is, you never have to present yourself, clean yourself up to present yourself to God. But even in that space, like God can hear from you all of the difficult things. That you might not say in front of other Christians, but you can say them to him. He's more than able to absorb that, and he actually even supplies you language that you can take from the Psalms and speak to him.
That's so important. It's interesting from my perspective that you've got all these lament psalms, not a lot of sermons on them. They're not often praise and worship lyrics, but it is part of the human expression of the soul to the range of emotions and life circumstances.
Yeah, absolutely. And then there wants to be communally spoken as well. Yeah. And I think, like I said, for me as a Pākehā and a European, my mother was Norwegian, not particularly great at lamenting and grieving communally. We often want to make it kind of private and personal. And I even found myself thinking, am I grieving right? Like, is this the right way to be doing this? Instead of just going, this is what's on my heart, I'm going to express this. And we had a beautiful memorial service for her. But I think I had a student in a course who's Kenyan, and he was just saying for him as a pastor in New Zealand, he finds it so difficult when there's a loss and the family will just kind of close ranks and it's just private. And he's saying, this is not good for you. Like, can we be together? Can we grieve together? Can I add my grief to your grief and somehow share that and carry that with you? There's just so much that Pākehā have to learn, I think, and it's but it's challenging because I think we just want things to be neat and tidy and clean. We're uncomfortable with those difficult emotions.
And
so
when we're feeling hurt and broken, actually sometimes there's a little bit of shame. This is something which we don't want to invite other people into that fragile space, perhaps a bit of that?
Yeah, absolutely. You don't want other people to see you cry and weep when actually that is the appropriate and healthy response is to weep in that. And but I do want to say that there are, like I said, beautiful moments that I had with my mum that were very different. And I think when someone is in the end of life, what your relationship with them is, it's different. You're not having a conversation. It's certainly not a conversation of ideas, but I had so many beautiful moments just sitting with my mum and holding her hand and listening to music, or just sitting and looking out the window at the trees and enjoying being quiet and still with her. And I often came away from those visits saying, oh, wow, that was really good for my soul. Like, it was actually a real blessing to me. It was an invitation to stillness, which was costly, I think, but still really beautiful.
It's difficult, again, to combine these emotions. Sometimes we think, okay, grief, that's all about sadness, that's all about crying and weeping. But actually, particularly when we do grief communally, there's also opportunities to be, surprised by joy, to quote C.S. Lewis, to find moments of joy even in the darkest times, and I suppose sharing memories of the person together, or even just finding strange things funny. Yeah, absolutely. You need to have some good laughs. And I think, even, particularly within a Christian context, when, like I said, my mum was very ready to go and be with Jesus, there is this celebration about that. And one thing my spiritual director said to me, which I thought was really helpful, like I was sad for me, but happy for her. And she said, it's kind of like when your last child starts school. And I've got 4 kids. So when my last kid was off to school, there was celebration, no tears. But you can have this, it's my baby, off she goes to the next stage. But you know that it's right. You know that it's time to release them. And there is kind of a sense of that, like it's right and good to release you. I mourn what was and what is not anymore, and I've lost that. But it also wouldn't be right for me to hold you. And I think that's really important, having that understanding of, while often we are praying for miraculous healing, restoration of health, that actually ultimate healing is something that happens eschatologically in Christ. And it is better, like I think Paul talks about in Philippians, it's better for me to go and be with Christ, but I stay for you. Like, it was better for her to go and be with Christ than to try and have lots of heroic medical interventions, which we could possibly have pursued, but decided against. It's actually better for her to go and be with Christ. And
just such an immense comfort.
Mm.
But it doesn't negate those difficult feelings. You've got to hold those two together.
Yeah. No, such an important balance to get right. And hey, this is life. We'll do it in our own ways, within our own cultures, and then it'll be messy and find God's grace in the amongst of really challenging situations. Maja, thank you so much for your transparency, for sharing part of your journey, for sharing what God has shown you during this time. Really appreciate that, and thank you for your time today.
My pleasure. Thanks, Andrew.